Have you ever wondered what the Bible actually says about the end of the world? It's not about crystal balls. It's about a checklist given to us by Jesus himself. He didn't give us a date, but he gave us signs, like road markers, to show us when we're getting close. He called them birth pains. Let's look at his list from Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. The scripture says, Matthew 24 verses 6 to 7, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom." This one is always on the news, right? But Jesus points to a ramp up in global tension and conflict. It's not just local fights. It's the sense that the world is always on the brink of a major explosion. Look at the massive, ongoing conflicts, like the war between Russia and Ukraine, the deep instability and conflict in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the complex, escalating conflicts in the Middle East. These aren't just isolated events. They are major powers and nations rising against each other. Luke 21 verse 11 says, "And there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences." Think about the COVID-19 pandemic. This was a single pestilence that impacted every single person on the planet in an incredibly short amount of time. That kind of global reach and paralysis perfectly fits the warning of a worldwide birth pain. We continue to see devastating, record-breaking quakes like the ones that have recently hit Turkey, Syria, or other parts of the world. These events, combined with the extreme climate disruptions, are driving massive famines across the globe, especially in vulnerable regions like the Sahel in Africa and parts of the Middle East. It's like the physical world itself is groaning. Matthew 24 verse 12 says, "Because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold." Mark 13 verse 9, believers being targeted simply for their faith. We see Christians being driven underground in places like China and facing violence rooted in Hindu nationalism in India. Even more tragically, we see the rise of Islamic extremism, groups like ISIS, Boko Haram, and others, driving ancient Christian populations to the brink of extinction across the Middle East, like in Iraq and Syria, and Africa, especially in Nigeria and Sudan. This is a clear, escalating sign of the darkness Jesus warned about. Matthew 24 verse 14, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." This is the big, final piece of the puzzle. Before the end, the good news has to be accessible to everyone. Guess what? With the internet, satellite TV, and instant translation technology, the gospel has reached practically every language group and every corner of the planet. Okay, now let's talk about a prophecy so specific. It's mind-blowing. This isn't a general sign. It's about a specific, future military attack on Israel. It's laid out clearly in the Old Testament book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. Ezekiel 38 verse 8 says, "In the latter years you'll come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people on the mountains of Israel." This is crucial. This war can only happen after the Jewish people are regathered into their historic homeland. This happened in 1948. Ezekiel 38 verse 11 says, "You will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. I will go to peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates." The attackers see Israel as an easy target, living in a moment of perceived safety, perhaps after some major peace deals. They think it's right for the taking. Ezekiel names the primary players in this massive attack. First, let's see who these attackers were, and then we'll see who they are today and their current relationships with Israel. The leader in his homeland. Ezekiel 38 verse 2 says, "Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal." Gog. This is the leader, the military chief of the whole operation. Magog, Meshech, and Tubal. Historically, this points to the regions north of the Black and Caspian Seas. Ezekiel 38 verse 5 says, "Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them." What do they want? Wealth and resources. The goal is plunder and loot. Israel's strategic location and its recent discovery of vast natural gas reserves make it a rich prize. Ezekiel 38 verse 13 says, "Sheba, Dedan, and the merchant of Tarshish will say to you, 'Have you come to take plunder?'" Interestingly, some nations protest this invasion, but they don't jump in to stop it. They just stand on the sidelines and complain. Now that we know the ancient names from Ezekiel, let's look at the modern map. The fact is, the nations lining up in this prophecy are not random. They are some of Israel's biggest challenges today. The chief prince of Meshech and Tubal is from Magog, which today is widely identified with Russia. While Russia maintains diplomatic ties, they are deeply aligned with Israel's enemies, especially Iran and the Assad regime in Syria. This makes them a major adversary on the northern border, constantly criticizing Israel's actions and supporting the opposing side. Persia is easy to identify, modern-day Iran. Their current regime openly calls for complete destruction of Israel. Iran wages a constant proxy war using groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, and they are the central financier of anti-Israel activity across the region. Meshech and Tubal. These nations were located in Asia Minor, widely seen as modern-day Turkey. Although Turkey is a NATO member, its current political leadership frequently issues strong anti-Israel statements and maintains a hostile diplomatic stance. Cush represents the East African nations like Sudan and Ethiopia. Sudan, though it was moving toward normalization, is now gripped by civil war and high instability, empowering extremist anti-Israel groups. Ethiopia is focused on internal struggles and remains an unpredictable actor. Put is identified with North African nations like Libya. Libya is unstable, divided by civil conflict, and does not recognize Israel. Its various political factions maintain a firm and open stance of hostility. The protesters, the Tarshish allies, these nations are mentioned as observing invasion but not militarily intervening. They simply question the aggressor's motives. This group today represents Israel's hesitant allies, Sheba and Dedan. These names refer to the wealthy Arabian Gulf states like the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. The UAE and Bahrain have full relations through the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia is actively pursuing normalization. They view Iran as their shared enemy, making them strategic partners, but they would likely only protest an attack, not risk war. Tarshish is often interpreted as the great maritime trading nations, like the Western powers, the UK, Europe, and sometimes the US. They are Israel's closest military and financial allies, but they are also constantly applying diplomatic pressure and criticizing Israel's actions, perfectly matching the description of those who merely question the motives of the attackers. This is where the story pivots. Israel is surrounded, outnumbered, and seemingly doomed, but God steps in. Ezekiel 38 verses 21 to 22 says, "I will call for a sword against Gog. I will bring him to judgment with pestilence and bloodshed. I will rain down on him, flooding rain, great hailstones, fire, and brimstone." God fights this war supernaturally. A massive earthquake shakes the region. God causes the armies to panic and turn their weapons on each other. When God intervenes and destroys the invading army, the aftermath is so massive that Ezekiel has to describe it using 2 extended time periods. This is where we see a startling possible connection to our modern world. The scripture says, "And 7 months shall the house of Israel be bearing of them, that they may cleanse the land." In ancient Israel, a dead body made the land ceremonially unclean. But why would it take 7 months for an entire nation to simply bury bodies? This is why many scholars believe this points to the aftermath of a chemical, biological, or nuclear attack. The burial teams who are specially appointed would have to handle remains that are lethally contaminated, requiring months of careful, systematic work to ensure the land is safe, literally cleansed, from whatever horrific weapons were used. The 7 years of burning weapons. The scripture says, "Then those who inhabit the cities of Israel will go out and make fires with the weapons and burn them. And for 7 years they will make fires of them, for they shall burn the weapons with fire. They will not take wood from the field, or gather firewood from the forest, for they will make fires with the weapons." The promise here is amazing. The leftover weapons will be so abundant, they will supply Israel with fuel for 7 continuous years, saving them from cutting down their own forests. This is a detail that truly challenges an ancient, literal reading of bows and arrows. Our modern weapons don't burn for fuel. So, how can this happen? One widely accepted view is that the weapons represent the immense oil, gas, and energy reserves brought by the invading coalition. Seizing these massive fuel supplies would certainly last for years and solve Israel's energy needs. A more chilling view is that the material is so toxic, such as depleted uranium and munitions or other radioactive components, that the only way to safely dispose of it is through a continuous, high-heat incineration process. This controlled, 7-year process will provide a colossal amount of thermal energy, fulfilling the fuel requirement while completing the necessary decontamination. The general signs are increasing, and the players for this specific, world-changing war are literally lining up on a map today. This is not about fear. It's about focus. It confirms that the Bible is true, that God is in control, and that his prophetic timetable is moving forward. Why does God do this? The Bible is clear, that the nations may know that I am the Lord.